The invitation came unexpectedly, arriving on a shimmering scroll, delivered by a polite but visibly uncomfortable courier, with indigo skin and 4 eyes. Markus Kane, seated at his cluttered kitchen counter, squinted as the scroll unfurled itself with a faint hum. The message was bold and unmissable. The esteemed Culinary Union of the planet Xyloria cordially invites you, human Markus Kane, to participate in an intergalactic culinary exchange. At the bottom of the scroll, an intricate holographic seal flickered like a tiny aurora. It looked important, though the courier's nervous glances around Marcus's chaotic kitchen hinted at second thoughts about delivering it. Amata said, smirking as he reached for his coffee. What's this about? The courier cleared his throat, his voice resonant but shaky. You have been selected based on your unique reputation among galactic chefs. Your culinary innovations, while unorthodox, have reached our esteemed council. This exchange will be a platform for interspecies gastronomy at the highest level. Markus rubbed his stubbled chin, recalling the time he made fermented durian ice cream for an amphibious ambassador. Unique reputation was a charitable way to describe it. After a moment of consideration, he raised his hand in a thumbs up. The scroll flashed in acknowledgement before dissolving into a burst of shimmering dust. The courier blinked. That was the acceptance gesture, correct? Yep, Markus replied, leaning back in his chair. Let's do this. His peers weren't as enthusiastic. Markus, said Jenna, a seasoned Earth ambassador and occasional sous chef, as she leaned over the edge of the shuttle's control panel. You can't just wing this. The Xylvarians are serious about food. Offend them, and it might not just be your career on the line. Relax, Jenna, Markus said, waving her off. I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm just here to show them what flavor's all about. Jenna groaned, muttering something about Earth's reputation resting on a chef who once boiled noodles and energy drink as an experiment. When the shuttle touched down, Markus stepped out into a landscape that defied expectations. Xyloria was a planet of endless culinary festivals. The air shimmered with edible mists, vanilla one moment, cinnamon the next. Vendors sold confections that floated in midair, and streams of liquid fire danced above sprawling banquets. Everywhere, there was the sound of sizzling pans, bubbling cauldrons, and the occasional bang of a failed experiment. A Xylorian steward with silvery skin and a crest of feathery tendrils approached. Human Markus, he said with a gracious bow, welcome to Xyloria. Chef Ovaria, Chef Ovoris awaits you in the Hall of Gastronomic Triumphs. Lead the way, Markus said, adjusting the strap of his travel bag. The hall was a marvel of culinary engineering, its ceiling alive with glowing menus that shifted and updated in real time. Tables surrounded a central stage where a regal figure stood waiting. Chef Ovaris, tall and imposing, surveyed the human with an air of polite skepticism. Her cerulean skin seemed to shimmer like satin, and her 4 eyes narrowed slightly as Markus approached. Human Markus, she said, her voice cool and measured, we have prepared for you a dish that represents the pinnacle of Xylarian spice. It is known as scalderite, a creation so refined, so potent, that it has defeated even the most daring palates in the galaxy. None have ever asked for seconds. Markus tilted his head, intrigued. What's in it? Ovaris raised a slender, hairless brow. It is a carefully balanced amalgamation of the Vulcanora pepper's essence, the distilled oils of the rift spindle blossom, and the ash of the soulflare root. Each ingredient alone could overwhelm even the hardiest of species. Markus nodded thoughtfully. Sounds like a fun challenge. Does it come with hot sauce? The hall went silent. Servers froze mid-step. A waiter dropped a tray of crystal goblets. Ovaris's expression didn't waver, though a muscle in her jaw twitched. Hot? Sauce? Yeah, Markus said casually, pulling out his chair. You know, to kick it up a notch, something tangy would be great. Human, Ovaris said, her voice growing icier by the syllable. Scalderite does not require enhancement. It is a masterpiece, forged in the crucible of our finest culinary traditions. Markus shrugged. I'll give it a try but options are nice. When the dish arrived, it was a spectacle. Scalderite glowed a deep, pulsating orange, radiating heat waves that distorted the air around it. The plate it rested on was reinforced with a translucent film, sparking faintly to maintain its integrity. Markus leaned in for a closer look, his curiosity outweighing caution. Well, it looks spicy. Ovaris folded her arms, clearly expecting him to fold within seconds of tasting it. Markus grabbed his fork, speared a sizzling piece, and popped it into his mouth. The initial sensation was like biting into the heart of a star. A tidal wave of heat crashed over him, obliterating rational thought. His eyes watered, his vision blurred, and for a moment he wondered if his tongue had ascended to another plane of existence. He swallowed. The gathered Xylovians leaned forward, awaiting his collapse, or at least a frantic plea for relief. Markus took a deep breath, dabbed his forehead with a napkin, and nodded. That's good, real good, but I still think it could use some hot sauce. The hall erupted in gasps. Ovaris stumbled back a step, as though physically struck by the statement. Hot? Sauce? She repeated, her voice trembling. Human, this dish is calibrated to the utmost threshold of tolerable heat. To suggest augmentation is blasphemy. Markus shrugged again. It's got a solid kick, sure, but it could use a bit more tang. For balance. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Servers exchanged wide-eyed glances. Ovaris turned to one of her assistants and barked a command in her native tongue. The assistant hesitated, clearly alarmed, before scurrying away. Moments later they returned, wheeling out a glass container that radiated an ominous crimson glow. Inside was a thick, bubbling liquid that seemed alive, thrumming with malevolent energy. This, Ovaris declared, regaining her composure, is Incineranx, the distilled essence of our most volatile compounds. One drop is enough to incapacitate a Croxite warrior. Markus raised an eyebrow. And it's just sitting here, in case of emergencies? Ovaris ignored him, motioning for the assistant to pour a single drop onto the scalderite. The air around the dish shimmered ominously. Proceed, Ovaris said, crossing her arms. Ah, Markus grinned. Don't mind if I do. He took another forkful, this time with the Incineranx. The heat was immediate and all-encompassing, a sensation that defied logic. It was no longer just a flavor. It was a phenomenon, a cosmic event condensed into a bite. Markus's face flushed, his breathing quickened. Then he exhaled, licked his lips, and gave an appreciative nod. Well, he said, his voice a touch raspy. That's more like it. Ovaris stared, speechless. The crowd erupted into a cacophony of disbelief, admiration, and outright panic. Servers backed away, as though Markus might spontaneously combust. Setting his fork down, Markus leaned back in his chair. So, he said, grinning at the stunned chef, you want to try some of my sauce? Ovaris was silent for what felt like an eternity, her 4 eyes locked on Markus as if she were assessing whether he was mortal or some culinary demon sent to unmake their traditions. Around them, the crowd buzzed with murmurs. The word human repeated over and over in tones of disbelief and awe. Markus, unfazed by the growing spectacle, reached into his travel bag. The audience leaned closer, craning their necks to see what he might unveil. With a flourish, he pulled out a squat, well-worn glass bottle filled with a fiery red liquid. "Here we go," Markus said, holding it up for everyone to see. The label read, "Inferno's Embrace," in bold, slightly peeling letters, adorned with a cartoon chili pepper engulfed in flames. What is that?" Oberys asked, her tone oscillating between curiosity and alarm. Markus grinned. "This is my homemade hot sauce. Fermented for depth, a blend of habaneros, Carolina Reapers, and ghost peppers with vinegar, garlic, and just a touch of honey. It's not just heat, it's balance." The murmurs in the room reached a fever pitch. One server whimpered audibly, clutching a tray of empty glasses as if it might shield them from the potent bottle. "Allow me to demonstrate," Markus said, unscrewing the cap. A sharp tang filled the air, causing several nearby Xylvarians to step back as though struck by an invisible wave of spice. Markus poured a generous drizzle of the sauce over the remaining Scaldarite on his plate, ignoring Ovarys's shocked expression. With casual confidence, he grabbed his fork, speared another piece of the glowing dish, and popped it into his mouth. The fiery heat surged through him, bolstered now by the acidic tang and complex layers of his sauce. Markus chewed thoughtfully, swallowed, and let out a satisfied sigh. "Now that's what I'm talking about." The room erupted into chaos. Spectators shouted in disbelief, some gesturing wildly, others backing away as if Markus might explode. Ovarys herself took a step back, her composure visibly cracking. "You added more heat to the Scaldarite?" She managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," Markus said, leaning back with an easy smile. "It's not just about the burn, it's about the flavor. Heat without balance is like a song with only one note. Here. You want to try some?" Ovarys blinked at him, then at the bottle. Her hands trembled as she gestured to a server. "Bring the protective gloves." The crowd gasped as a pair of shimmering, translucent gloves was produced. Ovarys donned them with the solemnity of a warrior preparing for battle. Markus handed her the bottle, and she examined it carefully, as if it might bite her. With a steady hand, she poured the smallest possible drop onto a fragment of Scaldarite, lifting it to her lips. The room fell silent as she took a cautious bite. For a moment, there was nothing but stillness. Then her pupils dilated, and her skin rippled with a faint, iridescent shimmer. A long exhale escaped her lips, accompanied by a wisp of steam. "This," she began, her voice quivering, "this is extraordinary." The hall erupted into cheers. Markus grinned, giving the room a casual wave. Ovarys set the bottle down as if it were a sacred artifact, her gaze fixed on Markus with a newfound respect. "It's not just heat," she said, almost to herself. "It's harmony." At that moment, the doors to the hall burst open. A tall figure strode in, his green-scaled body shimmering with the polished sheen of a professional chef's apron. His golden eyes scanned the room before settling on Markus. "Chef Grezar of Zintok Prime," someone in the crowd whispered, and a ripple of murmurs spread through the hall. Grezar's gaze was sharp and appraising. "So, this is the human who dares to play with fire on Xyloria." Markus waved, his grin unfaltering. "Guilty as charged. You want to try some hot sauce?" Grezar ignored the question, his voice rumbling with authority. "I did not cross 3 systems to taste Earth condiments. I came because I heard a challenger had arisen, one who defies the sacred limits of the Scaldarai Gia." Markus raised an eyebrow. Oh yeah? And what's your plan? Grezer's lips curled into a sharp-toothed grin. A duel. We shall settle this with a contest of spice and skill. Each of us will create a dish that embodies the essence of heat. The judges will decide who is the true master of fire. The crowd gasped, their excitement palpable. Markus leaned forward, intrigued. You're on. Let's cook. Within minutes, the hall was transformed into an arena of culinary warfare. 2 stations were prepared, each stocked with an array of exotic ingredients. Fruits that hissed when sliced, powders that shimmered like liquid starlight, and peppers that glowed faintly in the dim light. Grisar moved with precision, his claws a blur as he diced, seared, and blended. Flames leapt from his station, casting his scaled figure in a dramatic silhouette. Markus, meanwhile, worked with a calm, almost carefree confidence. He pulled ingredients from his travel bag, a jar of smoked paprika, a bottle of vinegar, and a small packet of carefully dried herbs, and began crafting his dish. Ovaris approached cautiously, her voice low. Markus, are you certain you can defeat Grezar? He is renowned for his mastery of spice. His dishes have left opponents trembling. Markus chuckled. It sounds like a fun guy. Don't worry, I've got this. As the final moments ticked away, the tension in the hall was electric. Grezar plated his dish with a flourish, presenting a towering creation of seared spice petals, glistening with molten glaze. The aroma was so potent that even the judges hesitated to approach. Markus unveiled his dish with far less fanfare, a simple bowl of stew, its surface glistening with a vibrant red sauce and a sprig of green garnish. The judges, a trio of Xyverian culinary experts, approached cautiously. They tasted Grezer's dish first, their faces contorting as the heat overwhelmed them. By the time they reached Markus's stew, they were visibly apprehensive. The first judge took a bite and froze. Then they took another, their expression shifting to one of amazement. The second judge followed, their eyes widening with each spoonful. By the time the third judge finished, the verdict was clear. The human has triumphed, the head judge announced, her voice echoing through the hall. Grezar scowled but extended a clawed hand. You are formidable, Markus Kane. You have my respect. Markus shook his hand with a grin. Good game. And hey, if you ever want to try the sauce, let me know. The crowd was still abuzz as Markus accepted Grezar's handshake, the sting of victory tinged with admiration for his opponent's tenacity. Grezar, for all his imposing bravado, seemed to accept the loss with a certain degree of grace, though his narrowed golden eyes hinted at plans for a rematch in the future. Ovaris approached with a broad, uncharacteristic smile. Human Markus, she began, her tone warm and tinged with awe. Your triumph has reshaped the way we view spice and flavor. Your dish, simple yet profound, was a revelation, and this sauce of yours. She gestured toward the nearly empty bottle of Inferno's Embrace, which now sat on a pedestal surrounded by cautious but curious Xylverian chefs. You must teach us its secrets. Markus scratched his head, grinning sheepishly. Well, the recipe's not exactly top secret, but it's a bit of a process. You guys have a fermentation chamber around here. Ovaris blinked, caught off guard. Fermentation? You mean letting it spoil? Not spoiled, Markus corrected. Enhance. It's all about letting the flavors mingle and develop over time. You can't rush greatness. The idea seemed to puzzle her, but before she could respond, High Steward Lymara stepped forward, her presence once again commanding the room's attention. The crowd fell silent as she regarded Markus with an inscrutable expression. "Human Markus Kane," she said, her voice ringing with authority, "your accomplishments here today extend beyond mere competition. You have challenged and expanded the boundaries of our culinary traditions. Such innovation cannot be ignored." Markus raised an eyebrow, unsure where this was going. "For this reason," Lymara continued, "the Xyloria Council of Gastronomy has decided to honor you with the title of Intergalactic Culinary Luminary, a distinction reserved for those who have revolutionized our understanding of the culinary arts." The hall erupted in cheers, though Markus could barely process the announcement. "Intergalactic Culinary Luminary," he repeated, his grin widening. "Wow, that's a mouthful. Do I get a cool badge or something?" Lymara hesitated, her composure flickering for a moment. "A badge is not customary, but I suppose we could—" "Great," Markus said, clapping his hands. "Make sure it's got a chili pepper on it, and maybe a little flame icon. Oh, and glitter. You can never have too much glitter." The steward's lips twitched, but she nodded solemnly. "It shall be done." As the celebrations continued, Markus found himself surrounded by eager Xylorian chefs, all clamoring for tips and techniques. He spent the better part of the evening demonstrating basic earth cooking principles, from caramelizing onions to whipping up a quick vinaigrette. "This is fascinating," Ovaris admitted as she watched Markus toss a handful of dried Xylorian herbs into a sizzling pan of butter. The resulting aroma made her 4 pupils dilate. Such a simple technique, yet the transformation is remarkable. "Sometimes it's the little things that make the biggest difference," Markus said, sprinkling in a pinch of salt. By the time the festivities wound down, even Valrix, the grumpy purist who had initially challenged Markus, had joined in, begrudgingly sampling a spoonful of stew and muttering something about chaotic brilliance. The next morning, Markus was back at the spaceport, his travel bags slung over one shoulder. Ovaris and Lymara were there to see him off, along with a small crowd of Xylorian admirers holding what appeared to be improvised signs. One read, "Spice King of Earth," in shaky lettering. Another simply depicted a cartoonish bottle of hot sauce with a smiling face. "You've given us much to think about," Ovara said, shaking his hand. "Promise you'll return someday. There's so much more we can learn from you." "Count on it," Markus replied. "Next time, I'll bring a deep fryer." Lymara stepped forward, holding out a small, gleaming medallion. It bore the Xylovarian crest, surrounded by intricate flame motifs. "Your badge," she said with a faint smile. "As requested." Markus took it, turning it over in his hand with genuine appreciation. "Nice touch with the flames. Thanks, Lymara. And hey, keep working on your heat tolerance. You're going to need it when I bring the next batch of sauce." The steward chuckled. "We will endeavor to rise to the challenge." "Hush!" With a final wave, Markus boarded the shuttle, the hatch sealing behind him. As the engines roared to life and the ship lifted off, he stared out the window at the shimmering expanse of Xyloria below. The galaxy was a big place, full of strange and wonderful flavors waiting to be discovered, and Markus Kane, self-proclaimed spice pioneer and now intergalactic culinary luminary, was ready for whatever culinary adventures lay ahead. As he leaned back in his seat, a thought struck him, and he grinned. "Man," he muttered, "I hope the next place has tacos." The shuttle had barely cleared Xyloria's orbit when Markus's communicator pinged with a priority message. He was leaning back in his seat, contemplating the universal allure of tacos, when the holographic display flickered to life. The figure of a uniformed Earth diplomat appeared, her expression a mix of relief and urgency. "Markus," the diplomat said, skipping formalities, "we've just received word from the Galactic Culinary Council. They're requesting your immediate presence on Ventrax Prime for an emergency summit." Markus straightened in his seat, his curiosity piqued. Emergency summit? Did somebody undercook the galactic souffle? "This is serious," the diplomat said, ignoring his attempt at humor. "A diplomatic crisis has arisen. Reports suggest it involves food. And, well, after your recent triumph on Xyloria, the council specifically asked for you." Markus blinked. "Me? They want me to fix a food crisis?" "You're now recognized as an intergalactic culinary luminary," she pointed out. "Congratulations, by the way. It also means the galaxy expects you to resolve situations where food and diplomacy collide." Markus rubbed his temples. "Let me guess. The fate of intergalactic peace hinges on a perfectly balanced plate of nachos." The diplomat's silence was telling. Markus sighed. "Fine. Plot a course to Ventrax Prime, but someone better have coffee awaiting for me when I land." The journey to Ventrax Prime was uneventful, save for Markus tweaking the recipe for his experimental hot sauce in the shuttle's tiny kitchenette. By the time they arrived, he'd concocted a new blend he nicknamed Inferno Fusion, a fiery combination of Earth's ghost peppers and a Xylovarian spice powder he'd borrowed during the celebrations. Ventrax Prime's diplomatic hub was a sprawling complex of crystalline towers, each shimmering with shifting colors. Markus was ushered into the central chamber, where an assortment of alien diplomats sat around a massive circular table. The atmosphere was tense. At the center of the room stood two representatives locked in a heated argument. Literally. One was a Pluvian ambassador, their gelatinous form quivering as they gesticulated with a pseudopod. Opposite them was a Zorakian diplomat, their flame-like body flickering erratically in agitation. "They burned our ceremonial broth," the Pluvian ambassador exclaimed, their voice wobbling with outrage. "You call that slop a broth?" the Zorakians shot back, their voice crackling like a bonfire. "It's an insult to Zorakian taste buds." A council member turned to Markus. "Chef Kane, we are at an impasse. The Pluvian delegation insists that their traditional broth is a vital part of any diplomatic gathering. The Zorakians, however, claim it lacks the intensity they require to consider it a meal. Neither side will budge." Markus stared at the two factions, then at the council member. "So you're telling me this is about spice?" The member nodded solemnly. Markus clapped his hands together. "All right, let's get cooking." He commandeered the diplomatic kitchen, which was a marvel of intergalactic technology. The pantry was stocked with ingredients from across the galaxy, some of which Markus had never seen before. A fruit that hummed when touched, a liquid that alternated between solid and gas. He grabbed what he needed, his mind racing with ideas. The key, Markus realized, was finding a way to balance the Pluvian preference for mild, harmonious flavors with the Zorakian love for intensity. He decided on a two-part dish, a base of Pluvian-style broth, rich and aromatic, layered with a Zorakian-infused spice oil that would add the kick they craved. Hours later, the dish was ready. Markus carried the two steaming bowls into the council chamber, where the delegates watched him with a mix of skepticism and hope. "This," Markus announced, setting the bowls down, "is my solution. Harmony broth with Inferno drizzle. The broth is mellow, comforting, and Pluvian approved. The drizzle brings the heat. Mix them together, and you've got a dish that'll satisfy everyone at the table." The Pluvian ambassador hesitated, then dipped a pseudopod into the bowl and absorbed a taste. Their gelatinous form rippled with delight. "This is exquisite," they said. The Zrakian diplomat followed, scooping a spoonful of the broth and spice oil. Their flames flared brightly, a clear sign of approval. Finally, a dish with some fire! The tension in the room dissolved as the two factions exchanged reluctant smiles. Markus leaned against the table, grinning. See? Food fixes everything. The council erupted into applause, and Markus felt a swell of pride. As the Pluvian ambassador and Zrakian diplomat shook hands, or rather Pseudopod and Flame, the head counselor approached Markus. "You've done it again, Chef Kane," they said. "Perhaps there's hope for intergalactic unity after all." Markus shrugged. "It's just a bowl of soup. The real magic happens when people are willing to sit down and share a meal." As he boarded his shuttle later that day, Markus thought about the countless planets, cultures, and cuisines still waiting to be explored. He set his sights on the stars, a bottle of Inferno Fusion in one hand and a notepad of new recipe ideas in the other. The galaxy was his kitchen, and he was just getting started.